What's happening, everyone? And welcome to a very special edition of the Systems Lab Live. I announced it late last week, but we're doing something pretty cool. And as you see here, because I'm usually solo dolo, but I got a friend here today. And I'm excited because what we're doing here is the builder segment, which is so fun. This is what we're really doing today is, and really from now on, is really helping to bridge the gap between like what we're doing behind the scenes. Okay, so we're sort of in this aspect of what does it mean to really build in real time. What does it really mean to unpack the process? And so I've been in some really, I guess, cool and fun experimental really having fun from like myself. And I'd love to hear, Kyle, as we'll kind of talk a bit about like, how you can kind of unlock your own creativity, right? But for me, I wanted to push the boundaries of like what I knew about project management. So I knew all the traditional aspects of it. But I wanted to study how people were building things, like, so I'm like deep into product, as Kyle and I were talking about. And now we're here. And so I've just been enjoying seeing people build out loud. And so now I'm in this slide. Now I'm just inspired to do more of that. So Kyle, I'm doing this whole podcast. I've blown it up. And so now I'm like doing my public podcast rebuild. So I'll be doing live streams on that and just giving a public update on things on that whole process. And so I am going to introduce you all, so it won't be, so you guys don't feel like you're like in our conversation. But join us in this conversation right here. This is my friend Kyle of Overflow. But Kyle, introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are, but not from the perspective of like title who you are. Who is Kyle? Who is Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, firstly, thank you so much for the invitation. Super honored to be here on the show with you. Absolutely love what you're doing and just how you are building, out loud and in public. So, thank you for having me. And hey, everyone, my name is Kyle Woumn. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Currently living in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I am currently serve as the VP of Engineering at a Series A funded startup called Overflow. So that's the high level about me. I grew up in Atlanta, went to college there, attended Georgia Tech. Always been a builder at heart. I know Ashley is, she loves the builders. And so, I've always been a builder at heart and loving the idea of being able to conceive an idea and then, work on it, build it and see it come into fruition. So I'm just a lifelong hacker, tinkerer and builder.
Oh man, I love that you said you're a lifelong tinker. You tinker. This
I
is
do.
so cool. I love that a lot. Um, so Kyle, so even with that, so the curiosity of like what could I do? Like what could I build? Was there a switch? Like where did that kind of come from?
Yeah, I think growing up is kind of where it really came from. I've always just been a curious person, and so I remember when the first iPod came out, I was just like, "How does this thing work?" I'm like, "How can I listen to music on this device?" It was just very intriguing, right? And so it started from there. Like my parents and family, they always saw that I had that knack for learning as well as like tinkering and building and just trying to understand how things work. And so they
Yeah.
found various programs for me growing up, and that really just helped cultivate my desire to be an engineer. And so I s- and I've never really been like I'm a creative, but I'm one of those people that have bad penmanship. You know, I
No.
I can't draw. So when it came to like actual physical projects, like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was I was never like a tinkerer in that regard. But if you give me a computer, it's like I'm
Lord.
it's like I'm a tinkerer there, and
Sure.
that's where I can like build, and I don't have to worry about my penmanship and things like that. And I know a lot of people think of like software engineering as like this very technical thing, and although is really also an art. Like software is an art,
Hmm.
and like building and creating software. So um yeah, I've always been interested in, like when I went to college, I studied computer science, and just seeing, I attended Georgia Tech,
Okay.
and I saw so many like colleagues. So when I first entered, actually, I started off as computer engineering. And for those
Uh-huh.
that may not know, the difference between computer engineering and computer science is that computer engineering is more hardware focused.
Okay.
So it's like kind of like the mixture of software and hardware. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. So think like the iPod, like the people that are working on the like iPod and
Yeah.
iPhones, generally they're computer engineers. And then people that are purely just software, those are software engineers, and generally that's like when you study computer science. And so, after my freshman year, I saw a good friend of mine. He got an internship at Google, and I was just like,
Oh.
"Whoa, how can I do that?" And so, after that, I made it a point to make it out here to the San Francisco Bay Area because it's kind of like the heart of technology. Obviously,
Really?
you can do technology anywhere, but I'm like, I want to be in the place where it happens, right? I want to be in the room where it happens for all those Hamilton fans.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
it. That's it.
and so that's what brought me out here to the Bay Area. While I was in college, I had an internship at GE in like the Salem, Virginia area. It's like southwestern Virginia. Wasn't a fun summer actually, but it was cool, and I had the opportunity to learn. And I was like, I want to be out in the Bay Area, and so I was able to get an internship at a company called Twilio. Um,
Okay, yeah.
they're they're a cloud communications company, and this is back in 2014. No one had ever heard of them at the time, and I just kind of like I was in the career fair line in college, and I'm like, I'm talking to the recruiter. I don't really have that much experience, but they take a chance on me, and I interview, get the internship, and I worked there for 2 summers, and then worked there full time for 3 years before starting my own thing.
Wow, I really love that, this aspect of, you just started just with just like the first step, number one, of like, all right, when I'm computer engineering, software engineering, choosing that path, but also just being inspired by just even a friend, like, oh, okay, how did you do that? You
Yeah,
know? And so, but see, I think there's a piece that, we shouldn't like overlook, which is that you just have to investigate. You just have to investigate, what if I did just take this phone call, or like just take this opportunity. You could have ended up like not liking it and then like pivoting, but you ended up at Twilio and doing that for 3 years. And so that probably that experience right there, tell me like maybe a few things that you learned there. What was that first day like? Yeah, what was your
yeah.
first day like?
So, interning there, like first day as an intern, it was just kind of like walking in. Coming from the East Coast, especially like the South, right?
Yeah.
When you interview, you wear a suit and tie,
Sure.
depending, the job and things like that. And I know
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mom will always be like, for the interview, you need to like make sure you're suit. And I'm like, Mom, no one does that anymore. Or maybe at least not in tech, right? Tech is a
Yeah.
little bit more casual. So it was kind of like a little bit of a culture shock to me.
Oh, yeah.
Just coming from this, I just expected like corporate, suit and ties. You're
Of
at the
course.
office at like 8 a.m. You're leaving at 5 p.m. And so, I get there, and it's like super relaxed. Like they have like a really cool like LED sign in the office. It's just like a very modern, that's what the office looked like. And they also had an open floor plan. So
Hmm.
generally people are used to like cubicles. Like when I was interning at GE, I was in a cubicle.
Yeah.
And so I'm like closed off. Do you work in a cubicle, Ashley?
I do not, but I know what that cubicle life is like. I tell you,
Yeah,
it's a little dark.
it's dark. It's kind of sad, honestly. And so I love like the open floor plan, and it was just like a fun company to work at. And so everyone was like very welcoming, and they had like their whole like orientation program to like walk all the interns through it. But long story short, that program that summer I learned so much. Not only did I build like my technical skills, but I was also able to build my network. And
Oh, so good.
people always share around like how important it is building your network, and I always knew it, but like now it's been about 8 years since that first internship, and it's like the people that I worked with are all at different companies, and it's just like
Wow.
you really see how small the world can really be, right? And so now it's like
Mm.
when people are looking for other opportunities, when they have that network, you know um they have those people to like rely on to reach out to.
Oh, I like that a lot, and just being able to know too, that there are people who are essentially creating, right? You got
Yeah,
folks that are creating, and yes, they're for bigger companies or maybe even startups. So you guys, I mean, you all have a bond, of being able
exactly.
to, and I really love that. So when did you have like this little wandering eye for like your own thing? Like, because I could imagine that some people, want to kind of pursue careers within companies, and that's just,
Hmm.
to each is their own. So what made you sort of dive into, like, I wonder if there's something that I could build? Like, what was that?
Yeah. See, I've never been one to like try to climb the career ladder.
Okay.
For me, like I've always just wanted to be. So I would say like, and it also comes from my upbringing. I would say I grew up in like a lower middle class,
Yeah.
family, and so for me, the biggest thing that I wanted was financial freedom. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted financial freedom, and I knew like, of course, you can get there through working at companies, but I noticed like these founders, right? You see the Mark Zuckerbergs and all the famous tech founders that you see, and it's like they had an idea, and they built a team. And I realized I had this epiphany one day at Twilio. I'm like, if I want to raise, it's like I have to ask my manager, and I have to like build this huge, business case, and I'm just like, wow, all this effort is like you see the work that I'm doing, but I have to do this, and that's kind of when I realized I'm like, I'm doing the work here at this company. I'm like, why don't I just do it for myself? So that was kind of like the epiphany I had. And there's completely nothing wrong with working for someone, but I knew that I didn't want to live just like an ordinary lifestyle, and I knew that I was called for greater. And so that's kind of what made me make the jump. But like leading up to that though, I tinkered and I built things on the side, right? And so I've tried a lot of things, Ashley. I started this one course called Idea to App Store. And the idea was basically
Interesting.
to teach people how to code and build their own mobile app within 3 months. And some people were actually successful. I had about 5 students. About three of them were successful. Some fell off in between. But I realized, the learning here was that that's just really hard to do, to teach someone how to code from scratch and build an app. And it
Sure.
and it also took up a lot of my time. It's
Yeah.
very service based, but it was a
Sure.
rewarding experience. I learned a lot from that. I learned how to sell because I was essentially, pitching my services to people. So I learned how to sell. I learned how to, teach, and bring people along for the journey. And then another thing that I did was this thing called Drakestagram. So I'm a big Drake fan, and I
Okay.
noticed that a lot of people would create. They would use Instagram captions. They would use Drake lyrics for their Instagram captions, right? A lot of people do that. They use song lyrics for captions, but
Oh, yeah.
Drake specifically, a lot of people use his lyrics for captions. So I created this thing called Drakestagram, and it was literally, or it was something I did over like a Christmas break. I was working at Twilio at the time, but I was just kind of bored, and I was just like, oh, this would be cool. So I built it, launched it New Year's 2019, January 1st, 2019. I just kind of like posted it on my Instagram. I wrote an accompanying Medium blog post with it, and it went viral. I'm not sure if Drake actually saw it, but it went viral. It's still up to this day. It has a few issues I need to fix, but it hasn't really been a priority. But it just shows that tinkering, and that really helped me like build my brand. And so when it was the time came at Twilio, I had been there for about 3 years, and
Sure.
I'm like, okay, what do I want to do next? And so that's kind of when a friend of mine had approached me, and she had left her job earlier that year, and she had started a company called Shopper. So it's
Mhm.
like on-demand delivery for clothes. So think Uber Eats, but for clothes. So in like a
Oh, man.
pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, say
Yeah.
imagine you have an event to go to this weekend, but you have a jam-packed week and you don't have time. The idea was that you would get a personal. You could say what you want. A personal shopper would come to you, they will bring you the clothes. Whatever
Wow.
you don't want, you can send it back. You don't have to pay for it. You only pay for what you buy, plus like a surcharge for like the service. So that was the idea. We applied to one of the most prestigious accelerators, startup accelerators called Y Combinator.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Mhm.
this was in 2019, and they were doing interviews in person. I think everything is virtual now, since COVID, and I think they just opened it up to the world because previously you would have to move to the Bay Area for like 3 months and do all of that. But we
Wow.
interviewed Y Combinator, and they would have invested $125,000 into the business, but we didn't get it, and it was a huge bummer at the time. But I didn't realize there was a blessing around the corner. So it was a huge bummer, and a big reason was because the unit economics for like delivery and logistics businesses are just really hard, right? 'Cause, you have to pay a
Yeah,
driver, and the
absolutely.
consumer isn't paying that much. So that's why companies like Uber, Lyft are barely profitable, if at all profitable. And so, I had already taken the leap though, even though we didn't get the funding, and I'm just like, man. And so I was the only one full time on the team though. So I'm like living off
Wow.
my savings actually.
Mhm.
And I see my personal burn, like basically my spend go down month over month, rent's due at the first of the month, regardless if you got a job or not, right? And so
Yes.
I'm going through, and so when I didn't get into Y Combinator, a guy named Vance Roush, I met him in 2017 when I first moved to the Bay Area. And I can give a little bit background later, but on like how we connected. But basically, he told me about this startup founder fellowship called On Deck. And
Mhm.
On Deck is a
Yeah.
founder fellowship for a lot of early stage founders. Some people, don't, they may just have an idea. Some people may have an idea but looking for co-founders. A lot of people that are just very early. And so I was like, okay, since we didn't get into Y Combinator, I need to be in the startup community. So I went through the On Deck program, and I just saw how people were building. They and their teams were building and making progress week over week. And I was the only one full time, for better or for worse. And so we weren't making that kind of progress. And it was just one of those things where I'm just like, man. And like I said, I was living off my savings. I see my personal burn go down each month. And then this
Right.
is right when
Wow.
COVID is hitting, right? So I
Oh,
left Twilio December 2019. And COVID happened March. And one of my co-founders, she was just like, I need to take a step back. She was looking to start contracting at another company. And so I'm just like, you know what? I don't think this is working. And
right.
so that was really tough, right? That was really tough. And I'm just like, man. So I let them know. I tell my team, like, hey, I really appreciate this opportunity. We had only been doing it for a few months, but I was just like, I don't think this is right for me. And so that's when I just kind of like took a step back, and I prayed. I'm a man of faith, so I prayed. I'm like, God, what's next? And I was like, do I go back
Mm.
to Twilio? Do I like freelance on the side until I figure something out? Do I start something else? And so remember I mentioned, the guy Vance.
Yes.
And so Vance calls me one day. He's like, "Hey, I have a Y Combinator interview, and
Mm.
for his company." And he was like, "Can you basically share some advice on how your interview went?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, happy to." So I shared with him, and basically, he had his interview, and he came back like a few weeks later and basically told me he didn't get in. And a huge reason was because he didn't have like a technical co-founder. And I was like, "Oh, actually, I love what you're doing." So now this is where I'm going to get into like the overflow story. And so who is this guy Vance Roush? So when I first moved to the Bay Area in 2017, someone told me about this church called Vibe Church. And so I walk in, and the first guy that I see is this guy named Vance, and he daps me up. He's like, "Hey, what's up? What's your name?" I was like, "I'm Kyle." He's like, "I'm Vance. Nice to meet you." I'm just thinking he's just a friendly guy at the church.
Yeah.
And then like a few minutes go by, and then they go up for the giving message, and it's him and his wife. He's like, "Hey, my name is Vance. This is my wife Kim, and we're the campus pastors of Vive San Francisco." So he was actually the pastor of the church, and he and his wife co-founded this church 10 years ago, with an Australian couple, and the main location is in Palo Alto. And
Okay.
so with Vance, and a lot of people that attend the church, Palo Alto, for those who may not know, is the heart of Silicon Valley.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you have a lot of big companies there. You have Google, you have Facebook, or now Meta. You have Tesla. I think they moved to Texas now, but you get it though. It's like a lot of big
Yeah.
tech companies are down in Palo Alto, right? And so, or in that kind of like general Silicon Valley area, and a lot of people that attend the church work at those companies. And so
Mhm.
every year the church would actually do a vision gala, which is basically talking about all the things they accomplished as a church, like think outreach in the community, etc. They will talk about it, everything that they've done in that year, and then they'll have an appeal to give for the. They will reveal a vision for the next year, and they'll have an appeal to give. But a lot of people didn't want to give cash, whether they didn't have it
Mm.
or not. But most tech companies, they actually incentivize, part of your compensation is in cash, but the other part is in stock. So a lot of these people wanted to
Oh,
donate stock. And so this
wow.
is where Vance gets the idea for this company, Overflow. So Vance is the founder and CEO of Overflow. So this is kind of where he gets this idea. And so he reaches out to me and he says to me, like, hey, this is something he basically told me, like, he didn't get into YC. And I was like, I understand what you're doing. Because when I was working at Twilio, I tried to give some of my Twilio stock to the church, but the way to donate stock today, a lot of people don't even know you can do it. But it's a very paper heavy process where you have to fill out some forms and you have to either fax it or mail it to your brokerage, right? And so if you ask anybody if you ask anybody to do that, no one's gonna
Right.
do it.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But but people are keeping most of their wealth in non-cash
Wow.
assets, right? And so it's like nonprofits, churches were missing out because there's this high barrier for people to do it. But it's like if you make it easy, they're gonna be very generous, and we've seen that in the last 3 years. So Overflow at a high level, our mission is to inspire the world to give, and we are a donation platform making giving donors and nonprofits more ways to receive gifts. So we started off with stock donations,
Mm.
and then we ventured into crypto, but then we also have low fee cash processing, so credit, debit, ACH, and we can pretty much beat most, if not all, like platform giving platforms with our fees. So that's who we are.
That's I love this story, and like I said, a lot of things were cooking when you were talking is because first, and I think people should, kind of pick up on this, is that, there is a point in time where you do have to weigh out your decisions about like what's actually working, what's not.
Hmm.
Because sometimes we will commit to something. I've done it where you commit to something just because you've made the commitment and you're just going to ride that thing out,
Yeah.
versus what's actually going to have me in purpose, what's actually going
Hmm.
to have me even productive. So you do, I mean, that's going to be like your own individual like decision making thing that that someone's going to have to do. But I love the fact that you were like, all right, I'm going to make this transition. And I love Shopper. Seems like that should be revived like
It's
now.
still a great idea. I need it.
I feel like there's some retooling. That's all it
Yes.
really is, of a little retooling, because that right there, I think that's still onto something. I think that
Yeah. Like I
I,
went to an event a few weeks ago. I'm like,
yes,
man, I wish I had Shopper.
yes, you wish that you had Shopper. And then, just by, your prayer and just sort of what's next, you were met with an answer, and that was Vance.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vance is inspired by seeing an immediate like problem, but also knowing this is how we can solve it.
Exactly.
And this is really cool. So something I picked up from Marty Kagan. Are you probably familiar with Marty? No, maybe not.
I'm not.
Inspired. He's like I guess a product guy. He wrote Inspired, and so someone who's a product strategist said start here to like learn about the product development. And so I heard of minimum viable prototype,
Hmm.
because in the book they're like, don't say minimum viable product, it's really minimum viable prototype, because what you're designing is it will iterate, it'll evolve. And
Correct. Yes.
so walk us through the actual prototype of like, of Overflow. Like, I mean, how does one even like, when you're building this platform and the app, like what do you need to get started? Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, was just you all two in a room? Just
Yes. So before I joined, so there were actually a couple people already on the team. So Vance,
oh, okay.
he had two engineers that was in his network. They were just starting out, but they're still really good engineers. They're just starting in their career. I think at that point it's kind of like you just like, I'm gonna like what I have, these are the resources I have, let's do something with it, right? I know a lot of people oftentimes make that excuse, like I need this to start or I need that to start.
Yeah.
And so so we had two engineers before I joined, and then we also had a product designer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then then I joined the team. And so yeah, the first thing, like you said, I've always just called it like MVP, but I never even thought about the distinguishment between minimum viable product and minimum viable prototype. But before even like writing any code, there were designs, right? And so we had an amazing designer, and he created, basically prototype wireframes that
Wow.
show the experience, so
Yeah.
that anyone can just kind of like click through, play around with it, right? And it feels real. And so, like for example, Figma is a tool, like a
Yeah,
design. Yeah, yeah. I
absolutely.
know you're familiar with
Yeah.
Figma. So yeah, and so Figma. So he used Figma to essentially like create those mock-ups, and then the team built like a first iteration and put it in front of people. So the thing is like get it in front of people as quickly as possible. So I was
Right.
actually, before I joined the team, I was actually that person that they put it in front of. So I wasn't there at the very very beginning,
Yeah.
but I was there like 2 months later.
That's really cool. So, because that's what I'm reading slash seeing is that you just go ahead and just put it out there just to see what the reaction is.
Yep.
Um, did you gain feedback along the way? And then for like your particular role, what were you like in charge of? Like, what were your first, how did that kind of like, what were your first thing that you had to do? What was your thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, great question. So for me, when I joined, this is when, so we hadn't quite launched yet, right? So we
Okay.
were still building out the first iteration of the stock platform.
Yeah.
And with the stock platform, it was kind of buggy. There were just a lot of things that were going on. I tried to I was basically dog fooding. There's this concept of dog fooding, like using your
Okay.
own product. That's basically what people
Yeah.
say. And so I was like, okay, well, let me donate. And we found a lot of hiccups even in like my personal experience trying to
Okay.
donate. And so basically, what we did was we worked through all of those hiccups, and then we just had to set a launch date. And so,
Yeah.
luckily we had some engineers on the team. We were able to build ourselves. Um, Oftentimes some people, like say for example, someone may not have engineers in their network or may not have like, the means to pay an engineer, and that's
Right.
totally okay. You can even start with the wait list, right?
Really?
And a wait list is a way to capture demand, and
Yeah.
this is kind of like show, hey, people want this. And if you can show investors a wait list, as well as like obviously you have to talk to customers and try to understand what they want and like how big of a problem it is. But if you're able to do that, you can at least secure some investment to build, this initial minimum viable prototype that we're talking about. So when I joined, my role was basically to work with our engineers, and I was actually coding. I'm still coding to this day, honestly, but just kind of like step in alongside them and build out this first feature that we could publicly launch. And so we publicly launched July 2020. It was a really fun experience. Yeah, we launched publicly. We had like this hype video and everything, and but early on we had to kind of manufacture demand, right? It wasn't just
Mhm.
organic. We had
Right.
to manufacture it. And I know that a lot of people call it like the code start problem. It's like, how do you get customers? So we're a B2B business. So that means business to business. And so we sell to nonprofits and churches. So when you think about it, right, nonprofits and churches for that matter, I feel like any like 501(c)(3) designated organization, they're not accustomed to paying for things.
Sure. Sure, sure, sure.
And so,
Yeah.
that was kind of like the uphill battle. And so we then hired an amazing woman. Her name's Alicia, and she worked at a nonprofit on the side, and or not on the side, but she like volunteered, and she's on the board
Yeah.
of a nonprofit. And what they did was they did these like happy hours where they would invite multiple organizations to come pitch their group,
Oh, love
and
that.
whoever gets the most votes at the end would get the donation. And
Oh,
so we're
cool.
like, okay, how can we do that for ourselves? How can we like manufacture this demand? And so what we did is like we connected with local nonprofits, and nonprofits within our networks. And we did these give a share happy hours where we would invite our friends, and basically we just wanted someone to give a single share. It didn't have to be a whole lot of money, but just to prove out the concept, to continue to prove, that hey, this is something that works, that people can do. We will host these give a share happy hours where we just invite our friends, right? Obviously we tapped out of that early on, but we would do that, and that was kind of those were like our initial donors and how we were able to get that initial feedback on our platform. We were giving the platform away for free. We weren't making any money at early on, but it was all to get user feedback, get customer feedback. And
Love
the biggest thing we did was just talk to as many customers as possible, or prospects, to try to understand what exactly it is that they wanted. There was a lot of education that we had to do early on, though, just
Mhm.
because one, stock donations. People don't really know about stock, that you can donate stock, as I mentioned earlier. So we're educating the nonprofits, we're educating donors, and we're still doing that to this day. I think now, 3 years in, the market's starting to understand, but that's just something that we're always going to have to do. But I think that's what helps us become, a category king or leader
Yeah.
in the space, right?
Yeah. I like that. And I think what was so interesting about what you're saying is that there was an education learning curve for
Hmm.
everyone involved. So you had to invest in that. And then two, you sounds like you brought along someone who worked with who was on a board, volunteered to get that insider perspective.
Yep.
Number two. And then number three, because I'm trying to toy between, especially because I think the construct of teams, I think, are, I guess they're different depending on maybe what you're building. I'm thinking, I'm not sure, but that's what it seems like observation. Okay, so when do you, because you had a product designer,
Hmm.
so is there like a product person that helps with the marketing, and do you hire those people later? But it's because it sounded like you and the team were like, you guys had to create your own.
Yeah, we were doing everything, and so we
Yeah.
were just like kind of like this, the skeletons team were startup.
Yes.
We went through this accelerator called Village Global, so they had
Okay.
invested about $125,000 into our company. And
Nice.
that's and so we're just kind of like the skeleton crew. It's kind of like, you figure it out, right? We don't have the money to hire the experts. So it's like
Yeah.
we become the experts. And so yeah, early on we had a product designer.
That's cool.
Myself, I was leading engineering. We had two
Mhm.
engineers. Vance was our CEO, or he is our CEO. And then the person that came from the nonprofit, she was our customer success
Yeah.
manager. But then, one thing that I realized is, we would have there would be a lot of things we wanted to build, and CEOs naturally always have ideas, right? And so Vance
Mhm.
will always be like, "Hey, I have an idea for this. Let's do this. Let's do this." And no fault to him, because he sees opportunity, right? But sometimes opportunity can be distractions, and
Yeah.
so I remember one time he and I were having a conversation, and he was like, "Who should we hire next?" This is 2021. And I
Mhm.
was like, we need a product manager. Uh, also, is mainly
Yes.
because for me, it's not that I have a problem with saying no, but I'm just like, hey, you have the you as advanced, like he has the domain expertise, but we also needed some rigor and some frameworks on,
That's right.
on what we work on.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
and I had worked with product managers in my past at Twilio, and so I was like, okay, like at the time I was doing both product and engineering, but it was just really difficult to do both.
I can
And
imagine.
and so I was like, we need a product manager, and
Yeah.
we luckily got a product manager, and another product designer, and they're like a husband wife duo, so that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
they work really well together. But that was a huge game changer for us. Like getting a product manager literally changed the game. And it's like I can do some product things. It's like I know product at like a high level, but I'm not a product expert, right? It's like
Right,
I can build products, but I'm not methodical when it comes
right.
to it. So I'm like, we need someone that's methodical, that has this background. And so we brought on a product manager who was previously at Meta, to join us, and huge game changer.
I love that. Recognizing what you can and cannot do. And it's not like you just gotta be real. You're like,
Yeah,
I only got capacity to do this like for the long haul. So it's like, yeah, we do need to hire a product manager. We gotta get
exactly.
someone. And the product manager, from what I've been reading and studying, they're the ones, I love how you said it. They're bringing the structure and the direction on like really like on overflow in terms of like, all right, what are we building now, like what's going
Yeah,
to be for this roadmap, right? Like kind
yeah,
of like those types of things. So as you decided to, and kind of came together on like, all right, got this person in place, you could then focus your efforts on the engineering. So that was
yes.
so that piece is like, what, Kyle, is that's the aspect of like, is it the improvement of the like the actual like the function and the features? Is that what you were really focusing on?
Yeah, honestly, both. So, it's like improving features, but also adding new functionality
Mm,
to the application. And
okay.
so, like in that first year, we had launched publicly. We launched stock, and then later that year, Vance was like, "Oh, well, let's support Vi's Vision Gala for the cash givers." And so we built like a really quick cash
Mhm.
donation like feature into our platform. But then there were like things like CRM integrations, for example, where people that use us for like to receive stock donations, but they want to be able to record that into their CRM. So some people use Salesforce. There's these other niche
Yeah.
CRMs out there. So, like building things like that. But then we're like, how do we sequence these things? And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, are there financial implications that are come? And
Absolutely.
and I did a little bit
Absolutely.
of that, and like, and like we partner, and like myself and our product manager partner on a lot of that stuff. It's just like, hey, how should we sequence this? And he's really good at just kind of like knowing and like prioritizing. But it's also not just a one person thing. It's like there's so many people that are involved
That's
in
right.
like that decision making process. Like of course, like the product area or business unit has their thoughts on where we should go just based on some anecdotal data, but we need to talk to other people in the business as well as customers.
I love that, Kyle, and I want to tease this out for the people that are listening and hopefully also taking notes. I know I feel very instructor like when I said that, but I think it's important to tease this out because okay, a few important points. Like scope creep is real and it's all over the
Ah,
place.
so
Okay.
real.
So here's the thing, like even if you're not in the product space, and some of you all might be in you might be a service provider, you guys might be even it could be e-commerce, it could be different areas that you're in. So just because someone says X, Y, and Z does not mean it has to be done right now. Okay. It doesn't mean even that it doesn't mean that the idea is bad. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It could just mean I love this. However, comma, we gotta explore, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, if we do add this, okay, and I love because you said you partner with the product manager on this, and I love because I'm tying some things together. All right, so if we do this, all right, engineering, I'm looking at you, Kyle. All right, so what's required for this? How many hours?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Is this difficult to, put together?
Yeah.
We don't have no money or we need money. You know what I'm saying? How would we market this? Like,
Yep.
like all these things. We talked to backstage about like the ambitious roadmap piece, right?
Yeah.
I do want to I want to talk through that. Who sets the tone for that? Like, who sets the tone for that? Like, how does that all come into play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally, at least how we do it at Overflow, right? Because I think every company is different, but I think most people do things fairly similar. And so what we've been doing roadmaps by the half. So
Mhm.
some people may do quarterly, but we do like an H1 roadmap, and then an H2. So half one of the year and then half two of the year.
Yeah.
And so that is, a collaboration between our product manager, myself. We even bring in like our engineering team because we want them to also have a
That's
say
right.
into this, right? They're part of this company. They want to see it win, and they're the ones building it. And so, yeah. So, but it usually starts there, and then we also loop in some people on our business side, right? So customer success. These are people that are making sure that our customers are successful. They often hear about the bugs as well as like the things that we're doing great at, right? And so we don't want to build in a vacuum. So
Wow.
we want to be able to invite different stakeholders in. But we do kind of start on the product side though,
Mhm.
like with our product engineering and Vance, our CEO. And what we do is we kind of list out everything that we could be working on, right? Whether that's ideas that we've had that just kind of like those internal hunches, like we like, okay, we need to build this. It just
Yeah.
like kind of feels right. We also have things that customers have specifically asked about, right? And then we have some big bets, so things that no one has really said that we need to do, but it's just something that we have a hypothesis on, and we're like, okay, if we do this, this could be really big feature.
Mhm.
And so we have all those things, and we kind of like categorize them, and say, okay, so these are our big bets. These are the things that customers want. These are things that we think we should do. And from there, we look at our team capacity.
Yeah.
So we have about 6 engineers on the team, including myself, right? And
Nice.
so we have 6 engineers. We look at our team capacity, and we kind of do like this exercise where we say, okay, we're doing this roadmap for the half. We try to take into account like time off, all that stuff, but we basically try to see how many engineering working hours do we have.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a
Good.
bottoms up approach to where we're trying to,
That's right.
we want to be methodical about it.
Yeah.
And so we have, yeah, so we basically look at, see, okay, what is our engineering capacity? And then from there, we look at, features people want, things that we believe that we can charge extra for.
Wow.
So, say for example, like expansion, especially in SaaS businesses, so software
Mhm.
as a service.
Yeah.
Investors love when you have what's called like a net dollar retention above
Ooh.
100%.
Ooh.
So what that means is, say for example, Ashley's one of my customers, and she has a yearly subscription. She paid, let's just say, $100 in one year,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
But then say the next year, Ashley is still my customer. She's happy, but she also wants this new add-on. And so now you're spending $150 with us. So
Mm.
in the prior year you spent $100 with us annually, but now you're on a $150 annual contract. So that's expansion. So we think about, okay, what opportunities for expansion do we have when it comes to building out these products, and then we just think about like the big bets, like if and these are more so experiments.
Yeah.
It's things that we're not sure. We're like, we think if we do this, it could go really big. And like one example of this is actually our financial advisor flow when going through our stock
Mhm.
donation platform. So we, in talking to customers one year, there's a big church that's one of our customers, and they
Mhm.
were and they were sharing that most people still did it the old way, or they had their financial advisor go through like directly without using Overflow. So the church is kind of like, dang, what are we paying Overflow for? And so
Mm.
what we did, we took that learning. We're like, okay, for example, some people don't even want to do this themselves. What if we just created a financial advisor flow? And this was literally like one of those minimum viable prototypes. It was kind of like standalone in the platform. We were actually using Typeform to begin with.
Yeah.
So we had a type form. We didn't even like put any engineering time into it. It was just like a hypothesis. We're like, okay, this is what we heard. People are circumventing the platform, and they're just doing it the old way through their financial advisor. We're like, okay, what if we add that functionality? So we did it the type form way, and you'd be surprised, actually no one, this was like maybe last like April or May, and no one was going through it. So it was like, wow, is this a dud? Like, is this, did we waste our time, but was this a failed experiment, right?
Yeah.
In building, there's never really a waste, it's just learnings. But
Right.
end of year financial advice, and well, so one end of year-end giving is huge, but
Mhm.
financial advisor transactions were through the roof. I think most of our transactions came through that financial advisor flow. And it was just like one
Wow.
of those things, like, wow. And we had these manual processes. We were like what we call flintstoning it, because we didn't actually build it into the
Yeah.
platform. But that was the validation that we needed end of year.
That's
And now we're
cool.
like, okay, we need to actually move this financial advisor flow into our platform. So that's kind of how we like prioritize roadmap. And then we have stakeholders, we have everyone signing blood. I'm just kidding. I wish we had people signing blood though, because things always change, or there's people that
Correct.
say, or if there's people that say, oh, I don't remember this, or I don't remember saying this. And so we need something that, some kind of record where we can say, okay, everyone agreed to this roadmap, and this is what we're doing. Because I
That's
think
right.
the worst thing that can happen is just kind of like getting distracted, or just like flip-flopping too much. Like, okay, we start
Correct.
working on this, but now we want to go in this direction. So
I love that this aspect of half one, H1, H2. It really gives, I think, a really clear picture of like what are we planning, and then as a whole. And this is just what I've been seeing it, in terms of like where I feel like the products in that environment, like how other industries can really start moving, which is how do we make sure that everyone is involved in the process, the decisions, the input, we know what I'm saying? Like don't just, and that's just, I feel like the old guard of doing things.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just gonna be like me and then somebody else in the room, and then we just gonna come out and be like, "Let's go." And it doesn't take into account of like the engineers. They're building the things. They
Yeah.
have they got ideas too. They've seen stuff. So I think a really important point that someone should write down is that, how can I make sure I'm getting other people involved inside of this collaboration? I think the second point you brought up, which was like, man, how do we make sure that everyone understands that this is what we agreed to? And so I
Yes.
think, whatever type of and I love to hear about like collaboration tools that you're using, but I think it's good to have this visual, whether it is on a Miro, whether it is, inside of ClickUp, whether your PM tool, and everybody can see after it's all
Hmm.
said and done, like, here's what it looks like.
Yep.
Right? You know what I'm saying? The third thing I love too was that the man hours. This is something that I've been talking a lot about when we kind of look into like this aspect of like the tasks and like preparing for the week ahead or what's the focus for the next couple weeks. How long does stuff take? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like, that's, like, a huge thing like that. So I'd love to hear, from you, Kyle, about, like, what has the team been doing to help, like, communicate better and collaborate and, like, those types of things.
Yeah. And like to your point, like how long do things take? Things
Yeah.
always take longer than you think they will.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, but the team, we're very collaborative, and like our main tool that we use is Notion. So like
Yeah,
our
that's
company hub
good.
is kind of like on Notion. We love Notion. Like for more like engineering tickets and things like that, we use Jira just to kind of like keep track of things, but more so just like company things, product roadmap, things like that. We use Notion. It's really easy for everyone to have visibility into what's going
Yes,
on,
that's
etc.
right.
And then well, I want to say, what was your other question, by the way, after tools or?
It was really, I think it was just, I do wanna know about, yeah, like, how you guys are collaborating on a day-to-day
Oh,
basis.
yes, 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 yes,
Talk
yes.
about Notion. That is a perfect tool to also use as well. The aspect of people being able to find information at any given time, the single source of truth. I'm telling you, it saves everybody a headache,
It
from the
does.
DM of like, "Where'd you put that?" When you're in the middle when you're in the
Yeah.
middle of something. Yeah, so I also think too, okay, decisions. How are you
Hmm.
all like, you like, okay, so you have the roadmap, but then we also know too that like there's also decisions that need to be made. So
Yeah.
how do you who makes them? How do you roll them up to Vance or like to you or like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll start with the collaboration piece and then I'll get to the decision maker. I'm writing it
Yeah.
down so I don't forget. But yeah, so for the collaboration piece, especially like within our product team, we've experimented with a multitude of things. I think that's like the beauty of it, and especially having a small team, is we get to experiment and see like what works for us and what doesn't.
Mm,
And so, previously we were doing like 2 week sprints, basically like 2 week chunks of work. But then we're like, okay, what do these sprints even mean? These are,
it is
kind of
true.
arbitrary.
Yes.
And so, right now we actually like we have sprints like implicitly, but we've kind of like we realized that we weren't really using it how I guess it should be used. And so we're like, okay, what works for us? And so we don't even do a daily stand up. So we have
Mm,
one thing we
I love
just
it.
started literally today is a weekly product sync. 'Cause we would have like all these disparate meetings
That's
throughout the
good.
week.
That's good.
And it's just like it's taking up so much time. People have to context switch, and that's just
Yes.
very expensive to context switch to like go from meeting to work to meetings. Like you can never get into that flow or get things done. And so we have this weekly product sync, and then we have like for our engineering and product team, we just have a Slack channel, and we encourage literally ask any questions there, like for within our
Oh,
team.
yeah.
Everyone's like super helpful, collaborative. There's no such thing as like a stupid question, right? Creating that safe space for
Mhm.
people to even want to like collaborate and speak up.
Oh,
So
man. Oh, no, go ahead, Kyle. Yeah, no, that's so good.
yeah, so that's one thing, and then we also have, like, various Slack channels just for, for example, like, product and marketing, product and, say, for example, our, sales team,
Yeah.
places for people to ask questions. It's just, like, everything you need to know, and then we've created some systems, right? Because, for example, there were times where we're just getting so many, like internal support tickets from like our team. And it's like some things were for sure needed attention. Some things were minor though.
Yeah.
And like we said, like you don't need to work on everything at that single moment. But it just became noisy for our team because our team would go in and check that, and it just took away a lot of time. We're like, okay, this on
Yeah.
fire. So we created like a prioritization or like a triage kind of where people can say like the level of urgency. And so they go to a website that we like an internal website.
Mhm.
They fill out this Airtable form,
Yeah.
and then it pings us into a Slack channel. And only the high
Beautiful.
priority ones ping us. Everything else goes to a backlog.
Mhm.
And so that's
Yeah.
that's kind of like how we do things. And it's been working out really well for our team. For sure, things that work for a product team of like 6 to 8 people may not work at a bigger scale. But
Mhm.
as we get there, we'll adapt. And so there's that. And then I wanted to see if you had anything to say there before I get into the decision
Oh,
making.
yeah. No, I think there's plenty to say there because I think this is a beautiful part about, again, like why we're doing the builder's plan because we do need to get an understanding about like what are these ways in which we can work better. We can be able to be focused. You said something so crucial, the context switching, which all of us do. We're just trying to figure out like, all right, I just came from this meeting. Like, what am I supposed to be doing next? And like, how do I shape like my superpower brain to go
Yes.
into the mode of like what I need, what do I need to create? So I love the fact that the weekly product syncs is this async pretty much?
So the product sync is so it's synchronous.
Okay, so
And
it's
so
synchronous. Yeah.
yeah. And then we were doing like async stand-ups, but no one was really checking it, and we
Sure,
weren't really
sure.
getting anything out of it. So yeah, we do
Yeah.
these synchronous product syncs, and we just all those disparate meetings we had throughout the week, we just consolidated
Beautiful.
it into one meeting.
Yeah. And I think so and this is what we have to I think do more I guess quicker because we have to iterate because I think at times it's like no well this is just what we're doing. No, let's if it's not and this is why you have to get everybody involved into your collaboration plan. Like everybody got to
Exactly.
get involved. Like so what's not working? I love that it's just the one meeting everybody's everybody's synced into that. Setting up the Slack channels are super key. And like you said, it's just a culture, right? You're
Yes.
utilizing Slack, you're answering all the questions. And then this is also what I love too, because again, when we talk about like where do we go to like find things? There's like different levels. We listen, we don't have time to get into like the knowledge management piece. It's like that's like part two in the summer.
Yeah.
But like people have to go and be able to find like where the information is, right? So
Correct.
where a conversation and I don't know if you guys have it that super structured where it's like folks kind of have like a brand new topic and they have folks to vote on stuff. But there's different ways in which people can go back and find information. You're
Yeah.
tagging folks, you know what I'm saying? You're pinning messages,
Yep.
all those
Yep.
types of things. So getting everybody on the same page helps the rhythm. You know what I'm saying? It
Absolutely.
just helps the rhythm. So that's what I have to say about that. And I just love that you all have navigated that so well. Because you knew, all right, this ain't working. All right,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
what are we gonna like? Let's fix this. Let's iterate, and let's just see how it's working for the team. All right,
Exactly.
so
It's like
then,
as opposed to going through the motions. So
yep,
I think we were just going through the motions just
I
because
tell
we said
you,
that's how
yeah,
that's how it's supposed to be done. But we're like,
yeah.
does this work for us?
It takes a brave soul to say, you know what? No, but nobody has us like, tied at the hips at this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Exactly.
so yeah, decision making.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to decisions, one thing is like we're pretty autonomous when it comes to decisions. So
Mm,
people have like if it's like a new idea, obviously you have to kind of like socialize it within the company. But say there's like a critical decision that needs to be made. Oftentimes, like I make calls, just like I make the call to either go, no go, what are we gonna do? Like
mhm,
for example,
love that.
we had a church that was gonna go that was looking to start with our low fee cash processing,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they really wanted a text to give short code number.
Mm,
And so a short code is like the 6-digit phone numbers, right? And we're like the short code it takes about 8 to 12 weeks to procure, and the church is trying to go live like recently. And so we're like, okay, and they're moving from a different platform. And so we looked at their platform and we were like, okay, and we looked into the data, and
Mm.
like one of our engineers was trying to like make this hacky solution because we have a short code, but it's through something else. So he's trying to create like this hacky solution, and he's like really good, and he's just like struggling. He's like, this is gonna mess up potentially other customers. And I'm like, yeah, we don't want to do that for this one customer.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, okay, let's look into the data. So we looked into the data on their, within their dashboard, and we saw that they had only had $10 in text to give giving donations within the
Oh,
last two
wow.
years. And
Hmm.
so that was an easy call, and I was like, you know what? And so I basically made that call. I'm like, hey, this isn't. We can get you like a standard long code, like the 10-digit
Mhm.
phone number, and that's super easy. You can still get the same text to give functionality. I think they wanted the short code because it was short, and I completely understand. But this is one of those things where it's like, hey, I see the data. I see that this hacky solution is gonna just give us tech debt. And so I made the call, and I was like, I spoke to the person, the rep that's been communicating with the church, and I was like, hey, can you share this data with them and let them know like, hey, we won't be able to do this, but we're happy to provide another way. And so it's like making calls like that. Some things I
Yeah.
definitely need to escalate up to Vance, and
Yeah.
there needs to be a bigger discussion. But then I also don't want to be that person that's always going to him like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I have
Absolutely.
to make decisions, and then I have to own the decisions, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like if those decisions weren't good decisions, I have to own it. But if it's a great decision, I still own it, and it's even better. But it comes with leadership, right? Being
That's
able to
right.
like make those decisions.
No, I think that's really good. And I think, our I guess what I'd like to kind of end it, well, a couple of things. I think, well, we need a part two because I just want to talk about like
Yeah,
how y'all manage risk, and all of that. But I'd like to hear about, what do you all have sort of, what's coming up the pipeline of what you can share, for H1, for the rest of H1. What are you looking forward to the most?
yeah. So one thing right now that we're really focused on is bringing this low fee cash processing to market. And so, as I mentioned, we have the lowest fees in the game for nonprofits and churches,
Yeah.
and um, we realize that this is a pathway to like really gain market share for our business. And so that's just been the biggest focus. We have some people that we're currently migrating over, and so that's really important. We have some smaller customers that are migrating over, and some big ones, but we treat everyone
Okay.
with care, right? Because
Sure.
it's like we can do the small ones, we can do the big ones,
Mhm.
and it'll help us gain more market share. So that's like the most exciting part for me. This first half is getting through these migrations. We have some in progress currently, and they're going well. And so that's the
Cool.
biggest thing I'm excited about. And then for H2, I know, last week as a team, we talked about a direction. I don't want to announce it live, but we can talk offline actually
Okay.
about this new direction. And it's not a completely new direction, but it's kind of like doubling down on what we already do. But
Yeah.
essentially, we just want to become the biggest giving
Mhm.
platform out there, right? So
Yeah.
like the Amazon of giving. And
Yeah.
so that's the high level. Like the details out
Yeah,
we can
sure.
we can talk about later, because I mean, and I'm not concerned that anyone will take it, but I want it to be a surprise and people like,
Sure.
wow, because I think it will definitely be something that's innovative in the nonprofit sector that hasn't been done before.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to hear more. This is really cool. And so I thank you, Kyle, just for being on. We covered a lot. So I feel
We
like
did.
this is a star in like the replay squad, that people need to make sure that they replay because there's a lot of really great nuggets in this particular story, but also too just in how you all build as a team. And there's a lot of lessons that I know I picked up. I think one of the things that is some good takeaways is that people should, really start to think through is like, when it comes to the tools and the processes, what is the least path of resistance? Number two, like, you know, make sure that you're also like not adopting like too much at one time. Make sure
Hmm.
you're getting everybody involved. And I love this aspect too, especially when it comes to the roadmap piece of it. And that part is super critical. And I want to just juxtapose it to like other industries, whether it's like online services or like if you're a service provider, if you're event planning, whatnot, that whether it's the top of the year or however that you kind of want to do it, think of it as a way in which, it's not just the one thing and it's isolated. How does that align to your business and strategic goals? Like that's really like what this roadmap piece is like. And
Yep.
that's why it can be, that's why it's applicable. Even if you wanted like a personal roadmap for your life, like
Yeah.
you can really play with it and really begin to really build something that's like super super meaningful. So get your people involved, get the team involved. Don't be afraid to also know when you need to scale back. um be realistic about your time. There's circumstance, so it's not just like build and go. It's like, all right, who do we need, what do we need, how much money does it take,
Hmm.
so thinking through everything. And so yeah, those are the big takeaways. There's so much more, but I thank you again, Kyle, and I thank you all for watching the Systems Lab Live special segment, which is the builder's plan. And so we'll be back with another interview soon. Just going behind the scenes in the process. So just building out loud and seeing where it takes us. So that's it, and I will see you guys next Monday. So see you guys soon. Bye.